Telemetry is defined as the remote collection and transmission of data for monitoring purposes. But what does that mean in practice? Well, everything that major tech companies do, that they develop and that they extend to you so that you can use your computer, you can use your phone, make your video calls, get on the internet, and all that stuff, you should expect them to be tracking every last bit of that. And I don't just mean them requesting information that you can opt out of. I mean key logging every single letter that you type, automated requests and pulls of screenshots on the websites that you visit, tracking pixels that build advertising profiles based on everything that comes across your feed, everything you see on your screen, seeing what devices are nearby, accessing your camera and your microphone when you don't want them to. Every little aspect of life has been made into a metric by these people, by these things that they make. And it's the endless analysis of all of that data telemetry is. And if it sounds dystopian, it's because it is, but there is, in fact, still something that you can do about it. Quite a bit, actually, believe it or not, whether it's on your personal devices or, in some cases, your professional devices. The first thing is to fix your computer. I'll start with what you can do right now, and it starts with your personal computer. Any one that you have, though, any computer, any device, I would recommend getting off of Windows, and personally, I would stay away from Mac as well, and move to, hear me out now, Linux. Doing so will basically cut out any telemetry by big tech except for the specific applications and websites that you might visit, but it's going to incredibly reduce that telemetry. And of course, if you use Microsoft Windows, it's going to cut out all of that AI slop that they're forcing upon you right now and all the breaks that they're putting out in their security updates. So how do you do this? If you want to cut this tracking out of your life and get some of your privacy back, how can you switch over to Linux? It is much easier than you might think, and no, you do not have to become HackerMan that lives in the terminal to do so. I've tried various versions of Linux, different flavors or distros to speak, I guess, more formally, and I found that Zorin is, I think, the closest replication of an actual Windows environment, and Mint to be the most simple that works right out of the box, the easiest setup and easiest to use, Linux Mint. It's much easier to migrate than you might think. But if you do want to become that HackerMan that lives at the command line, then you might want to consider CachyOS, Omarchy, or just Arch Linux. There are plenty of guides and videos on how to quickly migrate, but they all boil down to the same thing, regardless of whichever distro you pick. If you want one of those other guides, though, Some Ordinary Gamers, Linus Tech Tips, and I think PewDiePie have guides out on all of those now, so you can watch them too, but in the most simple form, this is what it boils down to. Before you do any of it, though, you have to make sure that you back up any important data on at least one external source before you do this, because whether you're setting up a dual boot to have multiple operating systems, or you're just moving over to Linux, making this switch and making these changes can very likely, if not certainly, destroy all of the data that is on that drive, that is on your computer, your device entirely. So make sure you back up the important things before you do this. Anyway, it boils down to simply getting a flash drive and then downloading the ISO of your chosen distro. In the case of Linux Mint, just go to Google and type in Linux Mint download and download the .iso file. It's probably going to be very simply laid out. Same thing with Zorin or whichever other one you pick. Then download a program called Rufus or Ventoy or Balena Etcher. You need to use Rufus, Ventoy, or Balena Etcher to write the ISO to the flash drive. You can't just drag and drop because that's not how it works. What these programs do, Rufus, Ventoy, and Balena Etcher, they change that flash drive into something called a bootable drive. Technically, you can't set it up to do so, but whenever you use these programs to move the file over, that's what makes it actually readable and able to install Linux. So once you have your flash drive, you download the ISO, you download Rufus, Ventoy, or Balena Etcher, and then you use that program to move the ISO, to install the ISO over to the flash drive, reboot your system, but do it in a specific manner. You can use one of the special keys to get into what's called the BIOS of your computer, or you can just go to, assuming you're on Windows, that's what I'm most familiar with, go to your search bar, go to your, run line, whatever it's called, and type in advanced restart. You're going to want to do that and select that flash drive as what you're going to boot into. That's going to get you into that spot where you can then install Linux. And that's it. These 6 steps right here, that's all you need to do. It is not that hard. I promise you can do it. Anybody can do it. If you know how to use Google and if you know what a flash drive is, you can download, set up, and install Linux on your computer. I promise that you can. But you might say, what about specific programs? I use Adobe Creative Cloud, or I'm a Mac developer, so I need to be in the Windows environment or the Mac environment so that I can do my job or follow my passion projects. I get that. I really do, because Mac, if you're an Apple developer, they are incredibly restrictive on the things that they allow their developers to do and where they allow their programs to come from. So in that regard, I get it. You have those restrictions. Same with Adobe Creative Cloud. If you're on Mac or Windows, you can use Adobe, but they don't natively support Linux for like anything. And that is a very, very common program that people use. So if you want to stick to that, I get it. You still do have options. And the first is that you simply don't migrate. You don't go over to Linux. You keep doing what you're doing, and you understand that, yeah, they might be doing all this telemetry and tracking and stuff, but you kind of accept it because you need to do what you do. I get that, and that's your choice. The second is that you have two machines. You have your work or your passion project machine where you have access to the thing that you want, and then you have a separate machine that is Linux, that's private. The third, as I kind of touched on earlier, is setting your system up, your main system up to be a dual boot system. What that means is you leave Windows or Mac, whichever one that you prefer for your programs, you leave that installed, and if you're familiar with it, side loading, but you basically just have the option to turn the computer on and start into Windows or Mac, and then start into Linux. It gives you that choice at every startup of your computer. And that might be the best option if you don't want to have two devices, two laptops or computers to carry around or whatever. It gives you the option in the machine itself, in the same machine, to go to Windows for your Adobe Creative Cloud, or go to Mac for your Mac development, for your iOS development, or to go to Linux to finally be in a much more private citizen on technology. And of course, no matter how many operating systems you have, if you have Windows and Mac and Linux, or Mac and like 7 Linux operating, whatever you set up, they're all distinct systems. They're only running as one machine at a time. So just because you have Windows and Linux on the same machine, Windows isn't seeing what you do on Linux. So they are still separate. It's treated as two separate computers in one then. So it's really a wonderful solution. If you have company hardware, you probably can't make all these changes to the operating system, to how the computer is built, because it's probably managed by your company. So that sucks. So you're still going to have a lot of this telemetry, a lot of this tracking, whether you like it or not, but you can limit it drastically by doing a couple of things. First, don't do personal stuff on your professional computer. Keep your personal life and your professional life separate. Don't go to your Google Drive. Don't do your photos. Don't go to your banking on your company computer. I would always recommend just don't mix the two. But if you're going to, and even if you're not, and you just want to be private in your professional capacity as well, more power to you. You can do these things. Use the Mullvad browser. I'm not sponsored by anybody. Nobody's paying me to do anything. But the Mullvad browser is ridiculously privacy-centric right out the box. Honestly, kind of problematic to the point of it like being problematic. So they're privacy-centric to a fault. But it comes with uBlock Origin preloaded. So it blocks all the ads and tracking from the very first boot up of the browser. They use their own what's called DNS table. So whenever you on your computer right now or on your phone type in google.com, you're not just going straight to Google. You're probably hopping along 4 or 5 domain name servers, DNS. And there's that route where you're going along somebody else's network. And admittedly, the Mullvad table is still their own network, but they have their own things put in place so that your identity is as hidden as possible along that route inherently, just by using their browser. It also blocks all cookies natively, so there's that tracking that's taken out too, but this one might be less preferable. This is where I kind of had some problems, because if you have cookies disabled, then you cannot actually save passwords for websites, and maybe you want to do that. What you would then do is just go to the settings, go to privacy, and then put those websites that you want to save the passwords to on your whitelist so that you can then do that. You might also want to change how it handles history, because by default, it nukes any and all personal data and browsing history whenever you close the browser. So every time you close the browser, every time you click that little X, it's going to shut. It's going to nuke all the history. And maybe you don't want to do that. Again, settings, privacy, make those changes as you want. The last thing that I'll note about the Mullvad browser is that you will quickly notice how it holds your web page as a window within the window of the browser. This is a feature, not a bug. Them doing that does something, it fights something called fingerprinting. So even if they can't see what you're doing, they can still get, because of the resolution that the website is displaying, the browser can pick that up and the website can request that information to determine what kind of device you are using. And they use this, they artificially change those dimensions so that they can't just pick up the information about your device simply because you're on their web page. So it does a lot for privacy. It does more than that, I'm certain, but those are the main points of what it does and what I think you might want to change. If you can, also be sure to use a VPN for any connections on your work computer, as well as your private computer as well, your personal one. I also use Mullvad VPN. Again, I'm not sponsored. There is something to be said about putting too many of your eggs in one basket, so split it up if you want to. You don't have to use Mullvad. You don't have to do any of this. But since you're here, especially if you're this far, I bet you do. Mullvad browser, incredibly private. Mullvad VPN, incredibly trustworthy and super affordable too. Use what you will though. You can certainly change almost certainly, depending to your company, change the VPN and the browser settings, which ones you use rather, on your professional computer. That's probably the extent of what I think you could get away with on a company computer, but let me know in a comment below if I missed something, please. Now, for quality of life switching to Linux, getting back to that for a moment, whether you can do it on your professional and your computer and your personal, or just one, there are some things that you should be aware of when it comes to convenience in Linux. A lot of it comes down to something that was covered by Super User Tech in his video, New to Linux. So link to wherever it is on the screen, I'll link that as well. I'll summarize and expand with these 3 points though. First, that basically each Linux distribution has their own version of an app store. And what that does is it allows you to find all of your options for whatever program you want. It categorizes it very, very well. And you're only getting this from trusted, verified sources. Now, do still take that with a grain of salt, because just like, the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, they also have a trust and verification process, but malware and sometimes bad programs still get into their paid stores as well. So treat it just like you would any other app store, but it makes it very, very easy to find the exact programs that you need. Second, that there are free and trustworthy Linux alternatives to basically everything at this point, with the small exception of a handful of things like Apple development, like Adobe Creative Cloud, and like something I'll touch on in a minute. And the third thing is that the command line is your friend. It is not there to make life harder for you, quite the opposite. And it's not that difficult for the very basics. In fact, it's quite easy. Expanding on the command line for a second. You should know a couple of basic commands to streamline finding and installing programs and updating your system even more. I'll list them here right now over my face. First is sudo apt update. I put that assuming that you're going to use like Linux Mint, for example. That's what I use on this machine right here in front of me. apt might be the one that changes, and honestly, update probably won't, but some of these commands might change. If you're using Fedora, it's probably DNF, but still, sudo apt update, that update command, you're going to want to know that. Same with the upgrade. The update basically fetches the list of things that can be updated for your computer. It refreshes that list, and then upgrade will actually go through and get that information and make and do those updates. It will upgrade your system. You can still go to websites and download stuff and, install files programs like you normally would on a Windows computer. You can still most often do that in Linux. Or if you know the program's name, just go to the command line and type in sudo apt install and then the name of your program. And instead of having to go through and search and fish through ads and hopefully get the right one, it does all of that for you from the trusted source. So you type in that one line and it just does it. If you want to get rid of a program, instead of install, you remove. Whenever you remove something, you may want to run auto purge, because that gets rid of all of the leftover files from stuff that has been removed, things that are no longer used. If it's just kind of there, it can pick up on that and then get rid of that for you. And then lastly, again, assuming that you are running Linux Mint, this is one that I found helpful because one of the programs that I was using on Windows was something called Scrivener. It's a common writing platform for authors, writing program rather, and I found it very helpful. The best alternative that I found on Linux was one called Tintero. That's one that I preferred. But they only have it as a .deb file, and that's not exactly what's used for my Linux Mint system. So if you have a deb file that you want to install, sudo apt deb, and then the name of the program. And it does it all for you. It is wonderful. It makes even more programs available to you from the very beginning. Now, those commands are all extremely helpful, I found at least, and those are the basic ones that I think any user of Linux should be familiar with. Now, what about common programs that, again, enhance that quality of life, that make things just a little bit more convenient for new users to Linux? Top is one that I think you should make sure that you have on your system. It probably comes with the system, so you probably already have it. But it acts as kind of a resource manager, so you can see exactly what's running, you can see what resources are being used in the very moment, and if you know the right commands, as I mentioned before, I didn't cover the one that you would need, but it's just kill whatever PPID it is. You can look a little bit more into that, but this is, I guess, a tinge more advanced, I guess. But top lets you see everything that's running, what resources are being used, and just the basics about your system. If you want something that gives you a more detailed overview of the resources of your system and what your system actually has, this is kind of like the system information. You would want to make sure that you have NeoFetch installed, because that's also the one that gives you the ASCII art, the letter art of whatever distribution you are using. CMatrix is a nice little aesthetic. You can run that in the background and kind of have that as sort of a screensaver whenever you're not using your computer, because what that does is it has the green and white letters fall down like it's in the Matrix. I love it. Vim and VimWiki are what I'm using. I just started using Zim as well as an alternative to note-taking apps and building wikis. For small wikis, I would say VimWiki is fantastic. But if you're trying to do like a content calendar, kind of like I would need for this, I found Zim to be much, much more useful. You can use tags, you can color code. There's a bunch of stuff that you can do that I'm still learning, but these are very capable offline private alternatives to other note-taking apps. If you want something that has more of that modern program feel and look to it, then you might want to look into Obsidian whenever you move to Linux. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're an author or you just like writing longer form, you can use things like Focuswriter. LibreOffice probably comes with your system, but I use Tintero. It is meant for authors. It's designed for fiction authors and for other much longer form books, fiction and nonfiction as well. But you can track world building, characters, settings, conflicts, relationships. It's building quickly. I've had some communication with the developer. Wonderful guy, incredibly helpful. It's fantastic. Love it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the browser and the VPN. Mullvad, hands down, I would say that's the best as far as privacy goes. But if you want something that's a little less restrictive and more, not that Mullvad is not functional, but more functional out of the box that a more general user might be desiring, Brave browser is what I would recommend if you're not going to go with Mullvad. Aside from key programs, gaming. If you're a gamer, kind of like I used to be, and I would like to still be a little bit, it is a major question that a lot of people have when switching to Linux. Rest assured, though, that it is as close to a one-to-one comparison with Windows gaming as it could possibly be right now. And that's largely thanks to Steam and their Linux-based Steam Deck, but there are things that still don't work yet, kind of like Call of Duty, like Battlefield. Multiplayer games basically are what don't work still, and that's largely just due to anti-cheat and how it works, how anti-cheat works. But it's all because of Linux security. They don't want to let anti-cheat run because of the level of access it needs to your system in order to run properly. And yeah, I don't get to play Battlefield 6, but I like that Linux is made so securely that they don't even let anti-cheat work. I like that. Even still, though, I've seen plenty of esports games and just about any other single-player game run perfectly on Linux. So CSGO, League, Dota, Red Dead 2 runs. Resident Evil 4 Remake, that also runs. So basically, if you're looking for single-player games or not Call of Duty or Battlefield, you're probably good. And that's thanks to things like Wine, Bottles, and Steam and other launchers. It's all really seamless. But all of that being your guide to switching to Linux, I suppose, and why you should and how you can make it easier, I really hope that you're ready to make the switch and take your privacy back as far as your computer can take you. I plan on going much, much further for myself and putting guides out about this for you so that you can go as far as you want to. Pretty soon I'm going to do something very similar like with Linux, but to my phone. But before even that, I'm going to build a cheap, simple device. I'm going to use a Raspberry Pi that blocks any and all ads and associated tracking. So on my home network, and I want to make one that I can take mobily. So I have no ads and no tracking on my phone too. So if that interests you, it's going to cost me like $20. It would cost you about the same too. And it's like 10 minutes to set up. So if that sounds good to you too, be on the lookout for that. The phone is more expensive to do, but if you want that, let me know below and maybe I'll bump that one up. I'd have to buy a new phone and that's expensive. But whether it's ads, fixing the phone, getting tracking out of your TV, setting up a home lab, like I want to do all this stuff. And as far as you want to go too, I want to take you with me. So again, if all this sounds good to you, especially if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Let me know how I can pray for you down below. Like this if you liked it, subscribe if you want more, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.